welcome our first speaker, Rui Oliveira.
So, good evening. My name is Rui Oliveira. In our lab, we are interested in answering the question of how the social environment shapes brain and behavior. And people find this question interesting, but when we say that we are trying to achieve this in fish, some people are puzzled and they kind of doubt that fish have the cognitive abilities and the behavioral flexibility needed for this kind of behaviors. And so this drives me to the first question that I would like to pose to you tonight. That is, which of these two brains do you think is better in terms of problem-solving abilities? We are not going to vote with cell phones now. It will be an old-style exercise just by raising your hands. Who thinks the human brain has higher problem-solving abilities than the rat brain? Even without the fancy voting mechanism, we can reach almost a consensus. There's a huge majority in the room that thinks that the human brain is a much better problem-solving device than the rat brain. Now, if we repeat this exercise with two different kinds of problem-solving devices that also differ apparently in the same scale, so you have a much larger computer in your left and a much smaller computer on your right. Can we repeat the exercise? So how many of you think that Z3 is a better problem-solving device than a MacBook Air from the last generation? Okay. So the question is if size matters, or if size is the only thing that matters in this equation, or if we have other parameters that we should consider when we discuss brain evolution and when we infer cognitive abilities and behavior potential of different organisms. In this sketch, you have an overview of brain evolution among vertebrates. As you can see, they are made of the same components, so different colors mark different parts of the brain. In dark green, you have the olfactory bulbs and peduncles. In light green, you have the telencephalon. In blue, the tectum and the mesencephalon. In orange, the cerebellum. Yellow is the brainstem and remaining parts. And in white, nerves and pores and pituitary. As you can see, they share the same plan, but there's a lot of variation in terms of the relative size of each part. And we can see that there's a trend for larger brains in the branch where we belong to as a species. And one of the first explanations that we can invoke for larger brains is larger body sizes. So if you increase body size, your surface area will increase. You will need more neurons to process sensory information from a larger surface area. You will need more neurons to control a larger muscle mass in your body. And so part of the explanation can come from just a relationship between increasing in a similar way different components of the organism. And so if you increase body size, and if you are selected for large body sizes, you will be selected for larger brains as a consequence. However, when you look into animals that are phylogenetically close to each other and not that different in terms of body size, you still find a lot of variation in terms of brain size, and particularly in terms of the size of different components of the brain. For example, the size of the telencephalon increases and gives rise to the wrinkles that Anna talked about in the clip that we have just seen before. And to the best of our knowledge so far, this increase is related to an increase in complexity in the social environment of these species. And so one of the ideas that is a current idea in neuroscience is that there were positive selection pressures for larger parts of the so-called executive brain that led to the increase of the telencephalon and neocortex. And social complexity can be measured by group size, so animals living in larger groups would have a demand for more cognitive skills that people conceive that need more brain tissue, or for the type of relationships that animals engage into. If you have repeated interactions, you have to remember a number of different partners and what they did in the last interaction and to adjust behavior accordingly. So there's a level of complexity and predictability in social environments that outpaces what is achievable with simpler rules. The issue is that this relationship is also found in other branches, for example in fish that we study, and also in fish, more social species have enlarged telencephalon. And so the question is, do you really need larger brains to solve this kind of problems? And if we look into simple minds now, and I would call simple-minded organisms fish, for example, although they have smaller brains, and among them there's this relationship that I've just mentioned before, they are able of solving some problems that most people would not expect them to do. For example, they are able of observational learning. In other words, they learn by observing third parties' interactions, and then they use this information in subsequent interactions with individuals that they have just observed before. And recently, they were shown to be able to do transitive inference that is considered a not so simple cognitive skill. And this is basically observing conspecifics, interacting, assessing, for example, that A beats B, then that B beats C, and inferring that then A would beat C without observing that happen. So apparently simple minds can do complex tricks. If we think of social insects and considering the impact of the social domain in the evolution of executive brain size in vertebrates, we would expect them also to do a number of elaborate tricks that most people would not consider them able to do. And in fact, I tried to collect in the literature the cognitive abilities of social insects, and I was surprised by the number that I want to share with you. So they are able of associative recall, and just a side note, these are not cognitive abilities like habituation or sensitization or learning, simple learning abilities like that. I was looking for associative and high-order processing abilities. And so the list goes on and on. Attention, binding, blocking, category learning, concept of symmetry, concept of sameness, difference, context learning, delayed matching to sample, generalization, interval timing, latent learning, motor learning, numerosity, observational conditioning, overshadowing, peak shift, second-order conditioning, sequence learning, and it goes on and on and on. So apparently even honeybees and ants are able of performing complex behaviors that people would not expect them to do with their small brains. So we came from simple minds to simplest minds, but we can go one step further and look into the minimal mind, and we can do this with the help of our colleagues from artificial intelligence. And basically people in this area have been looking into the minimal neural network needed for associative learning. And they came to the conclusion that, for example, to solve some of the tasks that I showed you before in bees, in fact, a much smaller brain than the brain of the bee would be able to solve the issue. So a few hundreds of neurons would be requested in an artificial neural network to do most of the processing needed for the cognitive abilities that we have just showed before. So this suggests that size is not everything, and just like as in the example of the computer that we showed in the beginning, there are other differences in the computer. In the case of the computer, it was obviously technology. In the case of a brain, a live brain, one of the issues, one of the examples we can give is speed of processing. And this is critical because, as you know, neurons communicate with each other with electric signals, with action potentials, that have to be transmitted along these neurites, these axons, that establish the connection between two communicating neurons. And the speed of the transmission of the information is critical for the complexity of the output in terms of behavior. And in terms of evolution, one can think on how to increase the processing speed and the transmission of information speed in this case. And the first solution for this was axon gigantism, was just to increase the diameter of the axon so that conduction speed would increase. But this solution has limits. I have not computed this, but we can compute how large our brain would need to be so that we could have unmyelinated axons that would have the same speed of transmission just by increasing the diameter of the axon, and most probably would end up with a number that would mean that we would have such large brains and heads to accommodate all these fibers that we would not fit in the door or something like that. So obviously, increasing diameter in an axon is not the only possible solution and not optimal when you have long axons that have to transmit information at long distances. So the evolutionary novelty that showed up was myelin that isolates the axon and allows an increase in speed. So in the first case, the conduction is being done by just going, if I'm a neuron, and these colleagues of mine are also neurons, and I'm trying to transmit an information to them, the action potential is just like going like this, you know, step after step. And increasing the diameter is just like increasing my shoe size, so I have less steps to make until I reach them, until the information reaches them. This other solution is different. I'm now isolating and basically decreasing the number of steps that I have to take to reach them, and instead of going like this, I'm jumping, and in 2 or 3 jumps, I reach them, and so I have saltatory conduction, which increases the speed of processing. Interestingly, myelin evolved independently several times, which illustrates convergent evolution. It's present in most vertebrates, but also in other taxa. And so it's a good example that size is not everything. You need also to find other ways of making the brain more efficient in terms of information processing. Just to give you an idea, most animals used both solutions, increased the diameter, but also the myelinization. And here you have an example of the speed of transmission and the diameter of different efferent fibers in a vertebrate, in a mammal. As an example, you can see here what was the limit reached with unmyelinated fibers, which was about 25 miles per second. And for this to make more sense to the general audience, you can see here that an A-beta nerve fiber would outcompete most animals in terms of running speed. Also a car, but it would be beaten by an airplane. So it's not as fast as an airplane, but it's rather fast, over 200 miles per hour. Okay, so to come to an end, what are big brains for? As I mentioned when I showed you the sketch with the comparative data, there are biophysical constraints, and so there should be a relationship between body size and brain size. But the replication of neuronal circuits is also an explanation for larger brains to evolve, because with replicated neuronal circuits, you increase the parallel processing of information, you get more detailed perception, better sensory abilities, and more storage capacity. Just an example of this last topic, humans are considered to have unlimited capacity for visual recognition memory. In terms of other animals, for example, birds that store food that they recover afterwards, like this animal here, tested experimentally, they can recover over 10,000 food items that they stored. But then when you go to a honeybee that uses landmarks to navigate, they cannot store more than 6 landmarks. So increasing or replicating neuronal pathways might increase the ability to store information. And so it might be a take-home message that brain size has more to do with quantitative changes than with qualitative changes, and I will leave you with this citation from Darwin that is polemic, and it can be the teaser for a future discussion. So that was it. Thank you.
So I hope that all of you will have a lot of questions that you will want to ask the speakers after their talks tonight. And actually, instead of having normal question and answers at the end of the event, we will transition outside where we will have drinks and discussion areas where you can sit with the speakers and talk to them one-on-one about your ideas and questions. So please save all those questions for later after the event. So get ready to vote on the next question. Are boys really better at math? See what you guys think. True.
Boys are even considered to be better at physics than girls, but this reason has more to do with sociology and history than it has to do with actual biology. So people have a tendency to behave according to the roles that society has of them and thinks that they should have. So if girls are considered to be worse at physics, then statistically in the population you will have less girls studying physics. This also means that in the last century, only the most gifted of women would actually study physics, while you would have the whole spectrum of giftedness being represented in boys. We now know that there is no reason to believe that boys should be better at physics than girls. Physics is a very complex science which requires the whole range of different talents and different approaches, and different individuals will have these different talents and contribute to the whole puzzle